All right. Well, we are live for my first Real Wellness live podcast. And I am so honored to have Dave Roberts as my first guest, which I'll explain why Dave is my first guest in a minute. But I'm Jessica Moyer. I think most of you know me, wellness and leadership coach and creator of the Real Wellness Framework. And this is about real conversations with inspiring people who are living with authenticity, purpose, resilience, and intention, even through life's challenges. I believe it's not about perfection. That's why I'm doing it live. Who knows what can happen? It's about building a strong foundation for your health, your energy, and your life. Let me tell you a little bit about Dave before we get into a really raw and honest and fun conversation. Dave Roberts has his master's in social work. He became a parent who experienced the death of a child when his daughter Janine died of cancer on March 1st, 2003, at the age of 18. He's a retired addiction professional and an adjunct professor in the Psychology, Child Life, and Health Studies Department at Utica University in Utica, New York. He is the host of the Teaching Journeys podcast, which is how I met him, and can be found on most podcast platforms and YouTube. Dave has presented workshops at many different conferences, Compassionate Friends, Bereaved Parents of the USA. The list goes on of the conferences you have presented at. He has been a past HuffPost contributor and has contributed many articles in many magazines and journals. He lives with his wife in beautiful upstate New York. They have two grown sons, 4 grandchildren, and you have 2 great-grandchildren, which I did not know, Dave. So I am thrilled to have Dave with us here today.
Jess, it's a pleasure being here, and I'm honored to be your first guest, and I'm excited. I think we're going to have a great conversation.
We are. And so for any guests tuning in, give us some thumbs up, give us some love. If you have any questions, you can post them. And I think my husband's watching, so I'm hoping he's going to test it for us. There's a challenge for you, Jay. Give me a little comment and I can see if it works. So, all right, we're going to jump right in, Dave, because we have a lot of good conversation. I prepared a few questions ahead of time, but we'll see where the conversation leads. And if anyone has any questions or comments throughout, please chime in, because this is really about how we relate to each other and how, life unravels in ways that we never expected, but what we can do to really protect our foundation of health and purpose and just a beautiful life. So, Dave, my first question for you, was there a moment in your life when everything felt flipped upside down, and how did that experience reshape your foundation?
Yeah, actually, there were several moments, but one penultimate moment, and I'll give your audience some background. I have danced with death since I've been 5 years old, from the day that my father left my mother and me, and my mother raised me as an only child, never to get remarried again. From the death of my maternal grandmother and my maternal aunt who helped my mother raise me, from several pets, which I've transitioned to Rainbow Bridge, a mentor and supervisor who taught me everything there was to know about working with teams, working with addictions, working with clients. He died in 1998, and there have been a series of losses that have happened. But the loss, and you mentioned this in the bio, the loss that for me just turned my world upside down, was the death, or as I call it, the transition of my daughter Janine from the physical world to the spiritual world. Saying that, it's how everybody conceptualizes death. I look at it as a transition to a new existence. Some people can look at it as passed away. Some people can look at it as my loved one died, and whatever verbiage that you're comfortable with as far as conceptualizing death as a verbiage that I would meet you at if I were doing bereavement support. But my daughter was diagnosed 3 weeks after giving birth to her first and only child. She was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. It was a connective muscle tissue cancer called avelian rhabdomyosarcoma. She had injured her foot during a freak accident during her pregnancy, and continued to swell during her pregnancy. And all of us thought, my wife, me, her significant other, that it was complications due to the pregnancy, normal edema, swelling of the foot. However, her foot did not respond to any traditional treatments for a swollen foot. So after Brianna was born, they did an MRI, found an undefined 8 centimeter mass at the bottom of her foot. And they biopsied it a couple of weeks later, and it was highly suggestive for cancer. We got the diagnosis. That diagnosis was confirmed in Boston, the Dana-Farber Research Institute. And just to backtrack a little bit, where I live in upstate New York, a little town called Whitesboro, New York. And we are not a sarcoma cancer center hub. We're more, we're more breast cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer. So we had to go to either New York at Sloan Kettering Hospital or the Dana-Farber Hospital in Boston. And Dana-Farber was able to see us first. But in a 5-minute consult, just what we were told is that your daughter had a stage 4 cancer with lymph node and bone marrow involvement. And there's absolutely no cure for her cancer other than aggressive chemotherapy to put her cancer into remission until the cure could be found. Now, what I heard, what my daughter heard, was unless there's a miracle, your daughter's going to die. Now, my granddaughter Brianna was born, and Janine's only daughter was born on May 2nd. May 19th, I just found out that I completed the requirements for my master's degree in social work. May 26th, had a consult with our local oncologist who believed that she had the Avelia rhabdomyosarcoma. And June 2nd in Boston, that was confirmed. And we were told pretty much, unless there's a miracle, your daughter's going to die. So I went from the joy of being a grandfather to the joy of getting my graduate degree to all of a sudden being an unwilling emotional caregiver to a child who, unless there was a miracle, I knew was going to die. And the 5-year survival rate for her type of cancer was 15%.
Wow.
Which meant that there was an 85% chance that she would die before 5 years. And it was 10 months from diagnosis to her transition on March 1st, 2003. She transitioned at home with hospice services, and she addressed her cancer journey in a way that was valiant. I call it grace under pressure. I think taking from one of Ernest Hemingway's novel, but she faced it with courage. She faced it with very much an awareness of her own mortality. But she was willing and she was determined that she was going to give it all she had to beat it, and she did. It was just an aggressive form of cancer that nobody had an answer for, and she had all the mortality indicators, tumor size. She had a childhood sarcoma as an adult child. So that was another, if she was like less than 10 years old, she would have had a better chance of recovery. So, and March 1st, 2003 was the beginning of learning how to navigate life without the physical presence of my daughter. And I will say this for your audience, and there may be a question. Did my training as a therapist, and I was an addictions counselor and a clinical supervisor, and I was believed I was very good at handling and dealing with and addressing other individuals' trauma. But I'll tell you something, Jess, I didn't have an answer for this one. All of my training, all of my education didn't prepare me for having to carry the legacy of my child when my child should have been carrying my legacy. She should have been outliving me. It shouldn't have been the other way around. So that led me on a journey of uncertainty, of fear. It thrust me into a world that was very, very foreign to me, very terrifying at times. And my job was to learn how to again re-engage in life with meaning and purpose without the physical presence of my daughter. So that's my story in kind of a very, very abbreviated nutshell.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dave. And I think there's so many parents, as you know, I've lost a child, and there is no way to navigate that when it's not something that you would ever think would happen to you. And so tragically too, that you have to, you had to watch your daughter die. I had to watch my son die. And there's so many parents that unfortunately have experienced the loss of a child, and there is no guidebook on how to carry forward. But I think through all of the things you do through the teaching journey and having conversations with so many people that you offer so much hope and help to those that have struggled not just with the loss of a child, but maybe something else that's heavy. And everyone, I always say everyone has a cross to bear. They're just sometimes heavier or lighter. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that. And I see we have Christina and Tiffany on here joining us. So thank you. Tiffany said, what a great thing to talk about so people don't feel so alone. Yeah. And I think that there's such a stigma and a taboo to child loss.
Yep.
And I know, and you probably experience it's like sometimes you don't want to talk about it because you don't want to make the other person feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's part of it because, I think there's a couple of things, and I teach this in my death, dying, and bereavement class, or selective response. Okay. Which means I can choose, I am the owner of my story. So I can choose to share that in a situation where I feel comfortable. Now, if I meet an individual for the first time and I want to develop a relationship with that person, I'm probably not going to share that I'm a parent who's experienced the death of a child, because that may put them in a situation that's going to be uncomfortable, where they do not know how to respond, or they do not know what to say to comfort me. Um, so, I think that's also a part of that. And, I mean, that's the biggest thing for me, is that, we have to do that. And a lot of people are just uncomfortable with that. So,
Yeah.
I've learned, kind of when to hold them and when to fold them in terms of how much I disclose. And the other thing I think is that we also need to show grace to those individuals who may not know what to say. We're a very death avoidance society. We don't have a lot of open conversations about death, though it's gotten better. It's not something that we do consistently in the society. We don't understand that death is a part of our life here, and that if we can understand that this is just a temporary stopover, we can use the knowledge of our death to lead a more fulfilled life. But we talk about death when it's upon us, and that's not the time to do it.
Yeah.
And so people traditionally don't know how to respond to you. So if they are really sincere and they say something like, you know, God needed another angel, or something that is would totally undermine anybody's experience, or, God needed another angel to till their garden, or, things like God won't give you anything more than you can bear. That one always got me, because God
Mhm.
already did, when he, with my, with Janine's transition. But if they're saying it sincerely, you can't fault them, because
Yeah.
most people don't mean to be insensitive. They are just said what they say, what they have been taught to say. And in many cases, what is comforting is not comforting to somebody who's grieving. And
Yeah.
that's any type of a loss of a parent, loss of a pet, loss of a child. And the other piece is that I can meet an individual at their worst tragedy. I never want individuals to say, well, geez, my tragedy seems to be inconsequential compared to you because you lost a child. Well, look, that was the worst tragedy for me, and that's always going to be my worst tragedy. But for you or somebody else, losing your parent, losing your pet may have been your worst tragedy. I can tap into the pain of my worst tragedy and tap into the pain of yours, because I know what that pain's like. And pain's universal. So if I
Yes.
can if I can tap into those feelings and those changes that I went through physically, cognitively, emotionally, I can meet you at the point of your worst tragedy with no problem. And there's no need to compare.
That's such good advice, is that when we're having conversations with people and we don't know what to say, is to remember how when we went through something similar, we can relate and be empathetic. And I always say just giving someone a hug or just I'm here to listen is probably the best thing you can do when someone's going through some tough times.
And the other thing, if you don't know what to say, tell that person, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, exactly. Just be honest because it's hard.
Yeah.
It can be really uncomfortable.
I don't know what to say, but I'm here. I'm present, and I can give you my presence. I can give you a listening ear. I can be present for you any way you need me to be present,
Yeah.
whether it's going to the store for you after the funeral, checking in with you. I'll be here as much as you need me to be here, as often you need me to be here, and what's going to make sense for you.
Yeah.
let them define what presence means. Let them, you work collaboratively with that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that, Dave. So we're going to talk a little bit about, since we're using kind of my real framework, energy. And I know when we go through trials and tragedies in life, there's sources of energy that are going to drain us. And then there's also some things that we can do to protect our energy or add value to our life through energy sources. So tell me, Dave, like maybe currently, maybe you can think back to when you had the loss of your daughter. And then now, what do you really lean into to give you that energy to have purpose in life and hope?
Well, I could go back to the beginning that my energy was quite compromised for a couple of different reasons. Physically, I tell individuals, think of the most tired you've ever been in your life, and then add grief to the picture and magnify that by about 20 times or more.
Yeah.
Um, so the physical fatigue was just overwhelming. Um, because of the stress of grief, I had difficulty sleeping. If I got probably about 3 hours a night, 3, 4 hours a night of any type of sleep, I was lucky. So on my days off, there's no such thing as catching up with sleep, but I would try to sleep like a baby. If I could take a nap during the day, and if I say like got 5 or 6 hours of continuous sleep before grief, I try to at least take some naps during the day so I could come close to that. So I think physically my energy was compromised. But here's the other piece with this that sometimes I think tends to get overlooked. The cognitive work that I had to do, particularly in terms of looking at my values, looking at my priorities, looking at my beliefs. All of my world at 47 was turned upside down. Everything that I believed about the laws of the universe, about fairness, about anything, about the progression of life, what safety looked like, all of that was shattered. And I had to literally do the cognitive work, which was just as much energy as the physical fatigue. So looking at how do I rebuild my world? How do I rebuild the foundation of my assumptions so that it can reflect the world that not necessarily I wanted to live in, but the world that I needed to live in.
Yeah.
So it was also the cognitive work that drained my energy. I think honestly, what helped me protect it was a variety of different things, and it kind of went incrementally. One was finding a good bereaved parent support group, and I have to credit my wife Sherry for that. She found a group that was sponsored by a local funeral home, and one of the things is, I think with any loss, and I can felt this way, I felt like I was all alone, even though intellectually I knew I wasn't alone, but I still felt alone because of the disconnect that I had from myself and the world around me. But then when we went to our first bereaved parent support group, Jess, there were 18 other parents that had experienced the unthinkable.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, well, I didn't feel alone anymore. I said, and I'm just sad that we're all part of this club that we never signed up for. But hearing stories from other parents that were 5 years, 6 years along in their journey, hearing what they did to get them through that gave me inspiration. The other thing that helped protect my energy, believe it or not, was my students at Utica University. Because Janine had transitioned 6 weeks after I started teaching my first class at Utica University. And to backtrack, I had applied for teaching jobs at local universities. So I wanted to teach after I got my master's and do private practice. But private practice went out the window when she got sick
Yeah.
and after she transitioned. Um, so I got hired by my alma mater, signed a contract, and this was when Janine had an upswing in her energy. The chemo was having some positive effect on her energy where she could spend time with her daughter, her significant other, her family, his family. Um, and so I signed the contract and I started teaching in January. Now, when you sign a contract, you're bound to that.
Mm-hmm.
So when Janine transitioned, I canceled one class, had to redo the syllabus, and let the class know exactly why I had to do it. And from then on, those students were kind of like loved me when I couldn't love myself, when I had really a lot of difficulty loving myself because there was a lot of guilt that I
Yeah.
had dealt with in terms of should I have seen the signs of her cancer sooner? Why didn't I convince her to go to one other clinical trial? Why? why was I so clueless? I mean, all of this stuff that I was asking myself. And in retrospect, I did the best that I could given the hand of cards that were dealt. But the other piece is that I learned that my daughter lived on her terms and she was going to die on her terms. She didn't want a clinical trial. She didn't want to do treatment in Boston. She wanted to spend as much time as she had with her daughter, with her significant other, and with her family. And I had to respect that decision. And in retrospect, she came into this world on her own terms and she was going to leave on her own terms. And as much as that was painful for me, I had to honor her wishes. Um, so so yeah, so all of that I think played a role. And what I think, again, with my students, if I was having a bad day and I didn't have the energy, I thought, geez, how am I going to get through a 3-hour class? They would come up and say, Dave, because most of my students, I tell them to go on a first name basis with me. Dave, you did a really great job with this lecture. We really enjoyed being in your class. So they just smiled at me, and that gave me hope. And they have become a part of now of my extended family. I
Yeah.
told them if I could figure out how to write you all off on my income tax, I would. But I think the IRS might have something to say about it. Would we be doing this from a federal penitentiary? I'd be, and I don't think that would go over too well with the
Right.
audience. So
Probably not. Probably
no,
not.
but that, and also reading. I did a lot of reading, read a lot of articles. That also, gave me an uplift in my energy. And now I preserve my, and also I've embraced different perspectives that have allowed me to re-engage in life, find meaning and purpose without the physical presence of my daughter. And I also realize that she's always going to be a part of who I am. She sends me signs pretty regularly. The best parts of who she is are the best parts of me, and having her essence within me always boosts my energy because it gives me that young burst of energy that comes out with my students, comes out in my interaction on podcasts, and comes out in my interactions when I'm talking to individuals. So I hope that answered your question. I kind of,
Yeah, that was great. And I love that you said, like, sometimes when things happen and your foundation kind of cracks, which is what I talk about, is you have to fill it in with different sources of energy that are going to complement the life that you're rebuilding.
yeah,
And so a big part of that for you is community and allowing other people to lift you when you couldn't lift yourself. And that's a big part of my messaging is like, we want to be able to we want to be able to help others, but we also have to be willing to accept help when we need it. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Yeah,
yeah,
Zoe's like meaning and purpose help us survive and thrive. So true. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It looks like we're getting a lot of comments
Yes.
in
Thank you
there.
guys. Okay. Let's
Yes,
talk
thank you guys.
about what is one small but powerful action you took that helped you move forward, after the loss of your daughter and moving through that grief process. And I know probably a big part of it was starting your own podcast and having these conversations.
Yeah, I think the one small step that I took, it was I met this individual through pure serendipity. Um, her name's Carla Blowy, as a matter of fact. She was a publisher for geez, I should Living with Lost magazine, and I met her through pure serendipity. This would take another hour to even to tell you how this happened, but I ended up finding myself on a phone call with her, um, and we talked to. She had also experienced the death of a child. We talked about our stories, and she asked me to write as a grandparent. With the surviving child, she asked me to write an article, and that led to a variety of different things. That led to her referring me to the Compassionate Friends. So that small step made me a part of a bigger community where I could, in writing and through speaking and through doing workshops, allowed me to 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 spread what had worked for me, to talk about grandparents' grief, to talk about my own parental grief, and to share my experiences in the hope that would help others. And so I think that one small step was picking up that phone and calling her. And this was when my subscription to her magazine ran out, and I was in panic mode. Um, and I called her, and she told me later. She goes, I don't usually pick up the phone at like 9 o'clock at night, but something told me to do that. And so that was the other part of it. And there were other small steps. I think 7 years, and I have to. There's an interfaith minister from Long Island, a woman by the name of Patty Farino, who I met through pure serendipity. We met because of a conference that I had been helping to coordinate, a grief conference in my area. Um, I ended up, the conference was in September. Through a series of very serendipitous circumstances, I found myself in her home in November of 2010, where for that entire weekend, she facilitated a spiritually transformative experience that allowed me to find peace with my daughter's passing, transition, and also to realize that and believe in the survival of consciousness when I hadn't believed in that previously, because I was always a science-based here and now guy. But now my worlds include definitely my core beliefs are science, but now my beliefs have expanded, where it now includes spiritual and other holistic practices that together with science can help individuals, I think, move through and integrate their grief and also improve the quality of their life. So those were the two small steps. The first one with Carl and the second one with Patty, which was kind of like, if you look at it, it's like, you have the perfect chocolate sundae and you're missing the cherry on top.
Yeah.
Well, the experience with Patty was the cherry on top.
Oh, that's
Mm.
awesome.
Now for your audience, just because I have found peace, and I have, I know my daughter is a part of me. I believe she exists in a different form. I believe in an afterlife. I believe in all of that. But because we're living the human experience, and we are spiritual beings living a human experience, because of that human experience, there are days that I still yearn for her presence. And
Absolutely.
and that's still going to happen. 23 years, I still wish there were days that she was here. But that I realize that I can't yearn for something for too long that I can't have. But that yearning is another way that my love comes out for. And I've learned that love isn't has many love can occur as a result of our challenges with pain. And and that tells me, geez, if I'm still yearning for her, I'm still alive. Um, and I've learned that it isn't just happiness, it's everything that makes up the emotional spectrum that's going to give us clarity. So
Oh, such a good point. And I love that your first action, I think this is so important. This has been a big part of my life is connecting with those people that I feel like God puts in our way. I mean, I totally believe in that. In that picking up the phone and having a conversation, even when it's scary or uncomfortable or you're worried about judgment, but how just one person can literally propel you into a whole new life that you never thought was possible. And to have someone believe in you too is so important. So I love that that was your step forward, was that the guidance of someone else. And that's a really important lesson for all of us.
yeah, and I also had to be open to that. And essentially the transition of my daughter, I had to rethink everything. Um, and including, my prior beliefs about how, the natural order, the universe, how the world operated. And Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun have developed something called post-traumatic growth, which is um, what happens after a really traumatic loss, a traumatic event, where individuals. There's about three different dimensions, and one of those is, reestablishing our priorities, reestablishing our values. For me, abundance. When I was, trying to get, chase promotions and I looked at abundance as financial security.
Mhm.
Now I look at abundance as abundance in relationships, abundance in the impact that I hope to make with individuals or individuals, students or individuals I've done bereavement reports for have told me that I've made. So, I've abundance has become now multifaceted and multidimensional, much like my view of the world right now.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And I think for me, everyone knows I'm so very much health based and health oriented. And abundance for me is, and when you lose someone that when they have no control over their diagnosis, like cancer or with my son's spinal muscular atrophy, it really makes you look inward on
Yep.
focusing, am I doing the things I need to do to be healthy, even when I get sick or something happens, because it's going to eventually happen to all of us. And so that's really my platform. And for your daughter who really, she had cancer and she couldn't help it, right?
Mhm.
So that's a big part of my mission, is to inspire others to take care of that abundance in their health. Because if you're not healthy, you can't enjoy the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think it's that whole mind, body, spirit connection, and you embody that very well. Um, before, I mean, the body was the last thing that I really took care of, and I'll explain that. At age 66, this was like in 2021, I'd always had a battle with food, and I'll call it a battle, where, my weight fluctuated more than the stock market.
I
Okay.
think many people can relate to
Yeah,
that, Dave.
I think they can too. But how we treat our body like a temple. I treated mine like an amusement park and put all kinds of funny stuff in it.
That's
So
brilliant.
yeah, it is. Yeah, but I did. So, so finally, it was like during the pandemic. I looked at my wife's shirt and I said, I had two pairs of pants that I bought 6 months ago. This isn't going to work. I said, I got to lose weight. I was 252 pounds. So the couple days later, I found Noom, reestablished different relationships with food, learned portion control, stuck with that, dropped about 70 pounds. I've kept it off. I work out now 4 to 5 times per week, with, light weights and aerobics and walking. And at 70 years old, Jess, I feel better than I ever did at 35.
Oh, I so love that. You're doing the things. And, I talk about just making smart choices, and way to go, Dave, 70 and kicking butt. So that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I think my wife's still waiting for me to have a growth spurt. She wants me out of early adolescence, but I told her, I said, maybe we can get to early adulthood by the time I'm 100. So
Yes.
yeah, we'll see how that goes.
But I think you made a great point, Dave, that everyone has a breaking point when it comes to health. And for you're like, listen, this is not going to work anymore. These pants are like, I can't even get them on. And it might be different for everyone. It could be they get the results of blood work and it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm a candidate for diabetes, but it's so important to really take a overall look at your health to see like what's going
Yep,
on and what are small ways that you can start to improve it. So I
absolutely.
appreciate you sharing that story.
Well, that I knew we were going to get to that. So, but
Yes. Well, that's what leads me into my next question. What are your current non-negotiables when it comes to protecting your health and your well-being, no
any
matter how busy life gets?
anybody interfering with my workout routines, that's not going to be pretty. So
Okay,
that's when I work out, it's early morning, and I won't take any phone calls. I won't do anything when I'm working out.
good.
The other part of this, and this is something I've learned as I've gotten older, I will not tolerate any organization or any activity that does not see my value. And I will walk away from individuals or organizations that don't see my value. And I'm not saying this to be arrogant, but I
Yeah.
mean, we have to recognize that we all have intrinsic self worth. And sometimes people don't recognize that. And if they devalue you, either ghost you or just basically treat you very condescendingly, and that's something, if you have another option, walk away from it. Don't stick around people that don't see your value. Um, or if they're going to ghost you, they don't see your value enough where they value you enough to tell you that you're no longer needed. Walk away. Find something
Yes.
that's going to feed your soul.
I'm writing that
Um,
down. Know your value.
yeah, you know your value. Yeah, and that's something it took me. It's taken me a while to walk away from that, but it's getting easier and easier as I get older now. Um, and so those are the two biggest things. Don't interfere with my workout routine, and don't devalue me, because if you do, I'm just simply gonna walk away and find a community that will support me.
I think that's so interesting, Dave, from a male perspective, because I know for so many women, like we undervalue ourselves, we play small, we don't want to show up in the world. And I've done this for so long myself, where you fear judgment. And I think you saying that is such a good reminder for all of us to know where I don't want to say fit in, but if you're reading the crowd and you're like, nope, I don't feel good here, this isn't my people, they don't see me, then it's okay to walk away. And that is such good advice. And I think Zoe just said that. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing, I was raised by my mother as a single parent. I was an only child. My mother was the epitome of resilience. I mean, she had two hip replacement surgeries. She had to work 6 years. It took her to get out from under my father's debt that he left her with. And she always looked at the bright side. She instilled a work ethic in me. If it wasn't for her, I would probably have not seen the value of an education. Um, and interestingly, and I said this on another podcast, my mother was diagnosed with tuberculosis at 18, and back in the early 30s, just that was a death sentence.
Yeah.
But she fought for 6 years and she beat tuberculosis. It compromised her lung functioning,
Yeah.
and the respiratory issues are eventually what led her to her death. Um, but I don't lose sight of the fact that she fought for her life so I could have mine. And so for the women out there, yeah, don't look at your value. You have much value, much more than maybe sometimes you give yourself credit for.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes as guys we don't always see that. We may not always say it, but hopefully we can show it through our actions. But um, because of my mother's influence, I married a strong woman.
Yeah. What a
Um,
beautiful legacy.
yeah, well, she left me that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
That's awesome.
so
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you one more question. What is one thing you want every listener to take away from this conversation?
wow. I think one is. Can I give you like two?
Yes. Give me two.
All right. The first one I think I would reiterate is value yourself. Um, don't give up hope. Even in the darkest of times, there's always light. And I'm going to quote from my favorite philosopher, um, the ex late great drummer of the band Rush, Neil Peart, whose journey has inspired me, is keep moving, something will come up. And another quote with forgiveness. A lot of times we find it hard to forgive ourselves for a lot of different things. And I'm going to give you another Neil Peart quote about forgiveness. Is he said this after his own tragedies, after the death of his wife and his daughter in the 10 months apart in the late 1990s. He said, there would be no life for me. There would be no peace for me until I learned how to forgive life for what it had done to me, to forgive others for being alive, and to eventually forgive myself for being alive. I had to do all three of those. As I looked at it, and it was his quote was profound because we always think about forgiving ourselves and forgiving others, and forgiveness is not easy. It's a process that we go through. But I never thought about forgiving the hand of fate that dealt me. But he said, but those were the three things. It was just brilliant in its simplicity. So keep moving till something will come up. Keep moving through the darkness until you see that speck of light. And Neil Peart's quote on forgiveness, those would be the one takeaway with subcategories that I would leave for you.
Yeah. Oh, they're so good. So good. I have to look up that artist. I don't know who that is.
His book, Ghostwriter Travels on the Healing Road, he wrote that in I think, the early 2000s. One of the best books and one of the most inspiring books that gave me so much inspiration on my own journey.
Yeah.
And there's just so much wisdom. This was a guy that walked away from his band. Um, he told his bandmates, he goes, consider me retired. He took a 4-year road trip on his motorcycle through Canada, the United States, and Mexico to find himself. He communed with nature. He went within, and he eventually remarried, had a daughter, and did some great music until he died tragically of brain cancer, glioblastoma in 2020. But one of the best musicians, best drummer of my generation for me, but also a brilliant writer and just a brilliant philosopher in a lot of different ways. So
Yeah.
Ghostwriter Travels on the Healing Road. Highly would recommend that as a
Okay.
resource.
I'm going to ask you when you have a chance, when we're done and this is posted, to put that in the comments in case anyone wants to reference that. So,
Yeah.
hey, Jenna. Hey, Nicole.
Yeah.
Any questions from our viewers for Dave or myself before we wrap up? Again, this is our first live Real Wellness podcast. I'll be doing them once a week. The time will change. I'm not quite the evening girl.
Yeah.
Zoe, forgiveness helps us heal and move forward. Absolutely. And music soothes the soul. Absolutely. I turn to music a lot when I'm feeling low. It can really lift you.
Me too. They were part of my community too. A lot of different artists, like the Counting Crows, the Wallflowers, Tom Petty, um, just a lot of different musicians that were kind of my, kind of my go-tos when I needed cathartically to deal with my grief, or I just needed some other form of connection. So
Yeah, I like that. Right now, I listen to Lauren Daigle a lot, who's a Christian singer. just when I need a little lift. So it's always good to have like something to turn to. But
Mhm.
Dave, this was a great conversation for all our viewers. I'll be putting Dave's contact information in the comments. So if you want to connect with him offline and learn more about Dave, he's just a phenomenal guy. And I never shared why Dave's my first guest. So I was a guest on his podcast, The Teaching Journey. I guess it was a couple months ago, right, Dave?
Yep.
And I was sharing with him how I started a podcast through Spotify, but I just like wasn't passionate about it because I need connection with people. That's what lights me up. I like the authenticity and the realness of something live. If something goes wrong, oh well, this is life. And I also didn't want to have to do all of the editing and other things that go along with a lot of people that put in a lot of work for podcasts. So Dave encouraged me to just do it. And I said, well, when I do, you're my first guest, and you are, and my mom's on here. Hi, Mom. So I just appreciate all your wisdom, Dave. You've helped me so much and given me some different perspectives on, the loss of loved ones and how to kind of navigate that. And I'll be coming up on my son will be, or my son that passed will be 25 in June, and I'm working on a big fundraiser I'm putting together right now. But it's crazy because your daughter passed March 1st, 2003. My son passed March 2nd, 2002.
Yeah. Yeah. That's,
So some commonality with our stories.
yeah, I would say, yeah. Yeah, March 2nd, I was up 21 hours straight. That started at 12:30 in the morning on March 1st and making phone calls. And for 21 hours, I didn't sleep, and then I crashed for about 3 or 4. So,
Yeah. It's crazy how you never forget certain dates, right? Like they
yeah.
just are embedded in your head. And then you can't remember other things that you should remember.
Well, and I'll remember the last day of my daughter's life till as long as I live, and also the days leading up to that. I know when she went into the active phase of dying, which was on my wife's birthday, February 27th. I know when we had to get my son home from Virginia because he was her older brother um, on medical emergency leave through the airline. I remember calling and they had to verify that she was a hospice patient. I remember a good friend of mine who has since died picked my son up at the airport, and I remember everything. I remember that last 24 hours as if it happened yesterday. And there's
Yeah.
certain days you don't forget.
Yep.
Um, and there's certain, but I've learned to live with that. I've learned to live with the fact that there's certain days in my life I'm not going to forget, good or bad. It's
Yeah.
going to be part of who I am. It's going to be part of what's made me.
Yep. And that's why I love you, Dave. You keep it real. And that's the
Hey,
name of this podcast.
yeah, hey, that's it. I've got nothing to hide. I'm an open book, and there isn't any question you can't ask me that I won't give you an honest answer to.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dave. If anyone wants to share this, if they want to connect more, just comment. We totally appreciate it. And we will see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.